for staff. So that might be one way to go. Lovely.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Super. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Really interesting. I think that's stimulated a couple of us to think about some ideas there. So next, I'm going to move out of the world of COVID, because we're a bit sort of embroiled in COVID, and I'm going to hand over to Deena at the King's Fund, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the role that the library service has played in managing the King's Fund corporate information, and really thinking about how to preserve organisational memory so it becomes part of business as usual. So I'll hand over to you, Deena, if I may.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, everybody. Can you all see the presentation?
We can. Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Usual question.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is really looking at kind of when we're talking about preserving the organisational memory, what I'm trying to do, and the essence of this project that I've been leading for the last year, is to get people to think about the history of our future for future generations. So what we're saying now is our history of the future. So the term archive in the context of the fund is really comes always back to the library. So anything found in a cubby hole or a folder they're not sure about, or some old document, usually heads our way, which isn't the right way to do things. And so they often we end up with things coming to the library either anonymously or with some note that goes with it. And people also know that we hold the kind of link between our historical collection at London Met Archive and our digital archive as well. So when I talk about archive from our perspective as a library team, though, I'm talking about our organisational memory and our organisational repository. So that's the kind of challenge I'm kind of dealing with at the moment. And really, I'm going to describe the project, which is kind of the first, I think, of many projects that will look at us capturing our organisational knowledge. So the scope of the project, it kind of started towards the end of last year. So our digital archive, which is to the left, we recognise we want to add more documents to this, includes our outputs like reports, but also we want to expand and include more web content such as our blogs, press releases, and other types of materials, which I'll talk about later. There's also, we've had 5 years where SharePoint's been implemented, and I have to say it wasn't an easy process getting SharePoint implemented. It wasn't the technical issue, it always comes down to people and culture, and there was a big challenge and lots of lessons learned from how we did that. But now we're getting to a stage where we need to think about, well, how do we house and retain the information that we want to keep forever? And then how do we start deleting the stuff that actually isn't relevant anymore? We also have our website, and we need to have a kind of refresh and redevelopment of our website, and it's kind of teetering on the edge now of how much content it can keep. So we're looking at kind of the stuff that we want to keep and move to the new website, but also stuff that we want to archive. The building, if anyone's been to the building, it's a very unique building, beautiful building. I haven't seen since March, but yeah, there's lots of it's like a rabbit warren basically, and there's cupboards full of things which need to be reviewed and audited. And so although we talk about the kind of electronic documentation, there's also still the need for physical storage of some of our documents as well. So the week that we went into lockdown was the day that after 10 years, I was going to discover the cupboard that was beyond the shower, which is called nicknamed the dungeon, and I still haven't got there, but I'm pretty sure that given where it is, whatever's in there is not in good condition. So we need to be auditing stuff around the building and have a designated space. And on top of that, we also have a new strategy. So we're looking at how we can ensure we're measuring impact and thinking about impact at the beginning of a strategy and not having that as an afterthought like we have done maybe in previous strategies. So that's the context. So these are the kind of processes we have. So we have Business Information Forum, which I'm part of, and that's kind of where organisational and system projects go. Ideas are presented, and then when we need to kind of scope those out, they go to the operations committee, which kind of gives approval for the project to continue or to start, and sometimes have resource and kind of financial implications as well. So the week of March the 16th, I was actually appointing for the Point 6 post, which would support the kind of preservation side of this work. I had the applications in my hand and literally had to give them back. So this post is now frozen until we can do the work or we're back in the building at some stage. But in the meantime, we were kind of building up a scope about us doing a project, looking at kind of all the information and knowledge we want to capture in the organisation and try to think about a better way of doing what we're doing now. Our retention and disposal plan really should be the kind of basis of how we collect and maintain what knowledge we capture. And it's a really good document. It's very long, it's comprehensive, it's clear. But the problem we found as we've gone through this year trying to talk to people about what we keep and what we don't keep fundamentally is that people just aren't aware of the retention and disposal plan at all. And even though every year it's checked by the information governance manager with the people who kind of lead in particular areas, we're finding that people just aren't really aware. And so this really is kind of the basis for the processes and policies that we want to kind of bring this document to life and get people to fully be on board with collecting for organisational preservation. So after we got to the scoping stage, we worked out that we wanted to look at the long-term vision. So we wanted a one fund approach. No, it's not a boy band, it really is want to be approach to how we manage materials and how we capture our kind of knowledge that we have now. And as I said, kind of get people to consider the fact that what they're creating now isn't just a project they finish and file, it's actually creating the history of the fund for the future. The organisational benefits is that we hope to improve the policies and processes and procedures that everybody in the organisation can follow and understand. And the main objectives are really having an accessible digital archive, a physical space, a small space just for the hard copy for now as a transition space, like I said, more policies, and to ensure that legal and regulatory documents are and available to inform future decision making. So how we led the project, I led the project initially and we worked with the information governance manager who led on the SharePoint implementation and deals with all the kind of issues with SharePoint, the governance support manager who deals with kind of committee papers and board papers, and head of facilities who was looking at kind of the building strategy as a whole. So we got them on board to try and think about space. And along the way, between April and August, we consulted with a number of teams. So obviously my team had quite a lot to say about how we might do this, and also because we don't necessarily understand the world of archivists, to be honest. We only see things from our ways, our sort of frame or lens, but we were the ones who had to deal with some of the challenges when files were brought to us and the people who actually ran the projects were no longer here. So we had lots to say. The digital team had a lot to say about how they wanted to keep resources in the future, and I'll talk about that in a second. Some things I hadn't considered, like our design and our logos and marketing materials. The design manager and marketing team were keen to capture these as well. And obviously our outputs and our project work through our policy and leadership teams. So when we went through this process, we identified quite a lot of different things that we needed to consider as archival and capture as our knowledge, really. So the things on the left here, like the blogs, we already thought that we'd be keeping the Word documents of these, and that would be easy to do. The sense-making material here, like the integrated care systems, we wanted to keep these. So these are kind of an explanation to key areas of health and care and policy, but actually what we hadn't considered is we want to keep also version control. We needed to think about how we kept different versions. We've produced lots and lots of animations, and often they give you kind of capture that moment in time within health and care policy, and we'd want to keep those, but obviously they're quite different formats to what we've kept before, so we'd have to think about how do we keep it in a preserved format for the future in our digital archive. The QMR here is a digital publication, so there's no Word equivalent, and also it's an example of kind of key figures and statistics that we put together that people do find useful and often cite, and we need to capture those in the format, and they're interactive, so we really had to think about how we do that. And also we produce a lot of audio content, so our project through the pandemic has been leading through COVID. We have lots of interviews. We want to keep those and preserve those and sort of look back and say what we did during this particular challenging period, I suppose. And also our podcasts as well. So they're a new format and we need to think about how we preserve those. So the challenges were I had lots of conversations with people, and it probably left me with more questions than answers. One thing I had to sort of work through was our director of finance was very keen on concluding us being a paperless organisation, and I really had to try and keep that out of scope because that wasn't important or relevant to us at the time. COVID, obviously, as I said, was an issue as well, because that means we can't actually get into the building to sort through the materials that's actually physically in the building. And often the conversations are easier to have around knowledge as well with people, and also money. So the venue is our key kind of income, and people aren't having weddings and conferences and Christmas parties at the moment. So I know that money is going to be a challenge when it comes to this project, and we do need investment. So as we went along, we developed options, and they're basically a variation on a theme. So it's really to have a physical archive somewhere. So it was either to continue on with the London Met Archive, or do we consider bringing the collection back, the whole 133 linear meters back into the building? And part of that thinking is because we often want to access it for exhibitions and look through kind of documents that we might find useful, whereas it's difficult to do that where it is now. And also to have a better capability of a digital archive, and that's whether we develop our current one or whether we commission a new one. And part of that was more because we have had the same supplier for 7 years, and should we probably go out and see what else is out there in the market. But also we do need financial investment to be able to develop the digital archive to capture all the different formats that we're producing and all our knowledge in that sense. There was one option to make no change, but that's really not possible because it would just mean we just wouldn't be doing anything, and it would just get more out of control, and that's not really what I want or anybody wants really in the organisation. So what we did is we took our options back to our business information forum and tested them out, and we presented option 1 as our preferred choice. So that's actually developing our current digital archive, keeping the LMA collection there, and having a small physical space. And actually it was really useful because they came up with some kind of ideas about and thoughts about the options, and then we presented the final paper to our operations committee, and in principle option 1 was approved, but given it was August and we needed financial investment, the kind of conditions are that we wouldn't be able to do it until there was financial support there, and other things have been prioritised towards the end of the year, so we don't think we'll be able to do this yet. But it doesn't mean to say we won't be doing that. I just think it's about using the right opportunity to actually get the investment we need. So where are we now? We have a plan, which is great. We have approval, even better. And we do have processes, so that we do have processes that we can kind of bring to life. We have organisational support, and I think one of the things that came out of the operations committee meeting is that they really did get that it's an organisational issue, and it's not just relying on the library team or the information governance teams. It actually is everybody's responsibility to think about how we capture this knowledge. But what we need now is we need investment. We need a space for the transition materials. We definitely need the 0.6 post implemented at the same time as actually the financial investment in the archive or the repository to develop that and make sure that the way we get the information into the database works. And that everybody is invested in this. And I think that for me, this is really got to the end of this project and thought this is the beginning of a much longer process. This is going to take time and it's going to take a lot of energy. And actually, it's not necessarily the systems that's kind of the issue. It's more about getting people on board and getting people invested in capturing what we're doing now for future generations. Thank you.
That's super, Deena. Thank you. It's such an interesting project, and as Andrew's commented, great to get a new project planned and approved in these times. So many people are just kind of sitting on their hands, aren't they, and a bit, feel unwell unable to move forward really. So absolutely fantastic. Oh, sorry, questions pinging in. So so Matt's got a question. Could you get a feel of what percentage of material is kept? Can you quantify it, or is it just too difficult to?
I think that's too difficult to do. I guess what I would say is what we capture now on SharePoint is the stuff we probably do need to keep, rather than in folders that are found in cupboards where everything is kept. That probably most things need to be kept in some way. But no, I think that probably is for a future project, Matt.
Super. Okay. Thanks, Deena.